We're going to go over the map function now. Map is one of the, in my opinion, one of the most useful native JavaScript functions out of all of them. It's the one that I use the most often and is probably the most important one for you to know actually out of all of these. The reason is because of well, I'll just kind of dive into it here and show you. So let's take this example. I created an array with a few numbers in it. Let's copy that over to the console, and then let's copy this function over. So what this function is going to do is when we run map on numbers and we give it this function, we're going to iterate through every item in our array and apply some modification to it. In this case, I've just kept it simple, and we're only going to add 10 to it. But we could really do anything that we wanted for every item in the array. And then we're going to produce a new array with the results of our modification. If we run this, then you'll see that result 1 contains a new array with 10 added to each value. So 5 plus 10 became 15, 15 plus 10 became 25, and so forth. A really important thing to keep in mind, however, is that the original numbers array did not change. If we show that again, we can see that's still 5, 15, 25, 35. What this map function actually did was simply stepped over each value of the original array and used that value within our function and then produced an entirely new array. And this is a very important concept because of something called immutability, which, as you learn JavaScript, there's a type of programming in JavaScript called functional programming, where you never want to modify the original array or the original value. You always want to make a copy. That way, as you're passing different variables around, if you create a copy every time, then you know that you're not going to modify a reference which points back to some other function, and that can get very problematic and buggy. So this concept of immutability is a really important one, especially within modern app development with React and Vue. It's a really good idea to keep all of your objects and variables immutable. And map is great for that because that's the pattern that it establishes. It looks at our data, does something with it, and then creates a new copy, or a new array, I should say, with the modifications added, but leaving the original one alone. Let's look at another example. Let's copy this over. This is an array I created just with a couple objects with information on people. I'm going to clear the console, copy that in. And what I'm doing here is, this is, in case you haven't seen this before, this is a shorthand for writing a function. This essentially just means function. And this is the same as, if I was to declare the function outside of the, map parentheses, I can just define it right inside of it as an anonymous function. It's called an anonymous arrow function. It's irrelevant to this tutorial. It's just a shorthand. What I want to show you is what I'm doing here. So I'm taking the value of each item in the array, which in this case is this whole first object. And then I'm creating a little bit of HTML here and interpolating values inside of it using using these backticks, and that will create a string with some HTML with the value of the person's name, address, city, state, and zip. It'll do that for this object here, and then it'll do that for this object here, and it will create an entirely new array that's now formatted as HTML. And there you can see, here it looks a little bit ugly. There's these, this arrow means that there is a line break or carriage return. You can ignore that because once this HTML is put into a web page, all it's going to care about are these HTML tags. But you can see that it formatted the data with the name of a person, the address, the city, the state, the zip, as the value for the first index, and then for the second index did the same thing. The reason this is really powerful is because oftentimes this is the majority of the work that needs to be done with custom scripts these days. A lot of what my work has been as a JavaScript engineer is working with APIs and with backend databases. And in either situation, often a query is run either directly against my own database or against a third-party API, and some data comes back, but it might not come back in the exact format that I wanted to be in for my app. And if that's the situation, I often need to do a little bit of formatting by renaming the values of things inside of a new object. And so I'm constantly turning to this map function to do just that because it just makes it so easy and convenient. I can plug in a quick arrow function, an anonymous arrow function, and map it over to my new format.